When that trailer came out for Independence Day, everybody was sitting in the theater, kind of in the springtime, because the summer movies are coming up. And you see a shot of the White House, and then you saw it blow up, and everybody went crazy. And Roland just knows what audiences love to see. Your jaw drops. And not only that, but you know, he may be from Germany, but he has this point of view about America. He grew up just loving America, and it's movies. That's where he learned about America. And he has the greatest stories, and like I said, he knows what audiences want.
The fact that it's true, that it's real. But yeah, you're right. Roland likes to take the ordinary man and put him in an extraordinary circumstance. And I think it's important for to see it because it's a part of our history. It defines not only the United States of America, but defines every country. I mean, it was a massive war. And there were many little battles in this war that are just as poignant, but this was a big one for the U.S. Navy. So.
I think it's not even just, speaking as a Britishman, I don't think it's just an American, it's just targeted to the American audience. I think, ignorant are those that forget the past. And I think, global history is all of our past. And, as we sit here in 2019 with all this divisive rhetoric from our politicians on these shores and on my shores, it's important that we remember the past. I approach this, and represent. I approach this as a pacifist, as a peaceful man, someone who considers themselves a global child of the world. Yeah, I've got a British passport and a London accent, but, I feel the American soldiers, just like the Japanese soldiers, are as much my brothers. And we need to learn from the past and the history. We need to see why we have this luxury of privilege of relative peace that we live in, that means that we can argue with each other so much about politics and such, and be grateful for the sacrifices and bravery of the men that came before us.
I would hope not. I think that would diminish the sort of the inspiring parts of what makes this movie special and what makes all war tales special. I mean, thousands of years, the human race loves war stories, not because of the war itself, but because of the resilience that ordinary people rise to under absurd circumstances. I mean, if you think of Greek plays and the great wars in Shakespeare, and even made-up wars, if you're talking about myths or even modern mythology of superhero battles, I mean, these are all stories of war and people overcoming obscene odds because we love rooting for underdogs, and we always look for inspiration in people rising to things that are so much greater than the sum of their parts. And yeah, I think if you boil it down to a patriotic look from one country's perspective, you're kind of eliminating what makes these men and women so extraordinary, which is, heroism transcends borders and nationalities and time and generation. And heroism doesn't necessarily show itself for people in uniform. It's people at home that are showing grace and strength, and they're people who are, young men that are scared, that decide that they have something in themselves to do something better, or people in offices that have to make very difficult decisions. And these are all brilliant, ordinary people that are really trying to do best by the people they love and the things they care about. And so there's absolutely no specific country that pertains to. That's every person in the world so.
Well, my father was in the Navy, which interested me in the Navy. But I was also. It's a fascinating story because it is working with Roland Emmerich. Of course, I wanted to work with him again. I worked with him in 2012, but I feel like it's such a great underdog story because the Japanese Navy had never. They were just. They were so strong even England couldn't beat them. No one could beat them. They dominated the sea at this time. And bless you, my friend.
Thank
bless
you.
Yeah. Okay. And then even though we had intel ahead of time about the fact that they were going to attack, we still would have lost that war if it wasn't for McCluskey following that destroyer out to the fleet, and then just, you know, in the course of 5 minutes, or that battle rather, in the course of 5 minutes, that battle got turned around. We sunk their aircraft carriers, which was the main strength of the fleet, which hadn't, that wasn't the case in World War I. It was only in World War II that started to happen, where the aircraft carriers were the strongest part. And so that changed the course of the war. And so I think everybody, you know, most people don't really know this history about Midway and the importance of the battle. So I feel like it'll be great for people to get a chance to see it. Yeah.
I think 100%. I think what's kind of beautiful about the power of art is that we can, you know, we can kind of penetrate the hearts and minds and consciousness of the people in a way that these politicians in their dry suits with their party rhetoric is just, you know, they just can't get through to the people, you know. And you know, what's beautiful about this is the kind of duality of the piece, in the sense that, you know, yes, it's Roland Emmerich, so we have all of that epic expanse and adventure and scale. You know, it's real Hollywood blockbuster stuff. But at the same time, it's, you know, Wes and Roland were so preoccupied with being historically accurate. You know, I'm reading accounts, and I'm seeing lines that we have in the script verbatim, you know, from these accounts. So it's a special thing. I kind of like the idea that you know, in history classes they could show this. I think I would have concentrated a lot more in history classes. They'd have shown a movie like Midway. So, you know, I think that's a beautiful thing, to blend the kind of epic fantasy and, you know, historical reality. I think it's important to remember that, you know, these men that are fighting against each other in war, and when you read accounts of the British and the German soldiers, you know, during the end of the war, when they'd capture them, and, you know, the few that could speak, Germans that could speak English and English soldiers that could speak German, they would just sit around talking about what a waste of life it is, you know, and how they were all the same, actually. And, you know, when you're separated from people, when you have an idea of otherness, which is part of, you know, what's dividing people now, you know, without speaking to them, without being face to face with them, without trying to connect with them, then, you know, you really have a vilified notion of the opposition, you know. But as soon as you come face to face, we realize that we're all, you know, fighting for the same things, which is to protect our family and doing as we're told, usually.
I think for war movies, but particularly this one, there's not a clear antagonist. It's not the Japanese versus the Americans. The real antagonist is war itself, and what that does to people who are really in the inner circuits of making those decisions of what outcomes can happen for their country. And yeah, I was speaking with Keen yesterday. I'm glad Ed said the same thing. But some of the most moving parts to me, maybe as an American, was seeing this sort of almost deliriously inspiring valor of these men on these ships that had such a code of honor. That's something that I don't think I could ever possibly bring myself to do myself, and it was really, really inspiring. So yeah, just showing how brilliant, you know, both sides were. It isn't, you know, there's an awful bit of luck and a lot of chaos that dictates the outcomes of war, but, you know, when push comes to shove, the people who are in charge are really, like you said, it's a chess match. You have these, you know, Yamamoto is this brilliant military mind, as is, you know, folks like Nimitz and Leighton, people who are doing their best to serve the people they love. And in that regard, there really is no sort of other and versus in this film, at least. Again, the real bad guy is just war itself.
That greatest generation, I think Tom Brokaw coined that phrase. They went through the Depression, and they went through World War II, and they sacrificed quite a lot of their youth. And they didn't ask for it. And now they're just about gone. My mom, she was 92, and she passed away a couple of months ago. And that generation, they had values, and they had that they lived and they walked. People, it's a great generation to learn from about keeping their promises. And I think everything that they had, we have today, and the youth of America has today, and our fighting forces and armed forces still have today. And it seems kind of confusing at times, but I think we're doing all right as a country, really.